Discovery Debrief is proud to announce a partnership with an all-new addition to the Star Trek gaming family. Star Trek Alien Domain Incursion takes you to explore the Gamma Quadrant on the other side of the Bajoran wormhole, where you have the chance to join either the Federation or the Indigenous Dominion. It features a multitude of multiplayer modes, allowing you to put your fleet and strategy to the test against other like-minded explorers. Build, research, and fight your way to the top, all in the comfort of your own browser. If you're interested in getting a leg up on what the game has to offer, the Discovery Debrief crew is proud to announce that we're giving out free access keys worth approximately $60 each in in-game items. All you need to do to get one of these keys is to write a review for the show on iTunes or Google Podcasts and send us a screenshot or link to your review either through our Facebook or Twitter pages or by emailing us at hailingfrequencies@discoverydebrief.com. Send us your review and get a key worth $60 in in-game items in Star Trek Alien Domain Incursion. It's that simple. You can find this Star Trek strategy webgame at incursion.gamesamba.com. That's incursion.gamesamba.com. Star Trek Alien Domain Incursion is officially licensed by CBS. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to new, ongoing Star Trek, and welcome back to the regular groove for Discovery Debrief, a podcast that dives headfirst into the proverbial deep end of the latest trek into the final frontier, Star Trek Discovery. I'm co-host Chris Clow, and I'm joined by our bold, returning panel of Star Trek franchise explorers, including Rachael Clow.
Hello.
Zaki Hasan.
Howdy.
And Cicero Holmes.
I don't want you to leave.
Well,
that was to Zaki.
It has been a long time since we've had Zaki on deck.
Yes,
but it's a homecoming in more ways.
I'm starting to feel like the special guest star. I'm like the Dr. Pulaski of this whole thing.
You're Reg.
Well,
that's either an upgrade or a demotion, depending on what you think of both of those characters.
Well, you're a regular in our hearts, regardless.
I appreciate that.
Just a busy guy.
It's been busy, but I cannot very well miss out on the chance to talk about this friggin' awesome episode, which I'm giving away the game a little bit. But
no, hey, you're avoiding the agony booth. That's great. That's great news. Well, it's been nearly a year since we last said goodbye to the crew of the Starship Discovery, but arriving back at not a moment too soon is the all-new second season of the first new Star Trek TV show to arrive since the end of Enterprise in the mid-2000s. When last we saw these characters, they went through a very tumultuous sequence of events and experiences, but survived an interstellar war and a perilous journey to a threatening alternate universe, much to Zaki's chagrin, to arrive at a new beginning. On top of all of that, Season 1 of Star Trek Discovery ended on a promise to show us exactly how its characters and setting would come to embrace the larger lore of the established Star Trek universe by incorporating Captain Christopher Pike and the iconic original USS Enterprise to leave us all with a sense of possibility. Now, though, the time for guessing is over. Season 2 is here, and I think I can speak for us all when I say that we can't wait to bring you a whole new season's worth of discussions and dives into the universe we all love so much. Of course, though, we'll ease into our news and episode discussions by talking about what everyone's been up to. How have you guys been engaging with Star Trek since we last recorded, besides, of course, prepping the second season premiere? But just in general, what have you guys been up to as we get back into the groove of recording again? Zaki, start us off.
I have not been engaging with the Trek franchise of late, and it's been kind of nice to have Discovery be the thing. Like, oh, okay, now it's time for Trek again. So I've had a long layover.
Yeah, Yeah, very understandable. And it's a pretty good way to usher in new activity. Now, do you see potential for renewed engagement extending from, I assume anyway, your pretty positive response to this episode?
Well, I rewatched The Cage
Mm.
right after this, and so that gives some inkling of where my head is at. And
Yeah.
I out of storage, I got the omnibus of the Star Trek Early Voyages comic book that Marvel did in the 90s.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm in like a Captain Pike mood right now.
Yeah. Hey, I don't blame you. I mean, I was actually listening back to the Desperate Hours audiobook because of the inclusion of Captain Pike in the Enterprise, and I'm going to be interested to see if there's any crossover there going forward. But no, it's good to know that you're in a Captain Pike state of mind. He definitely inspires as such, I think, after seeing him in this episode. But we'll save that for a little bit later. Rachel,
I read the Tilly book.
you did.
Yeah. Oh. What's it called? Way to the Stars.
Way to the Stars, yeah.
The Tilly book. Yeah, it's good. It's like a YA book.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I mean, she's a YA character.
Yeah, yeah. The book. Well, it starts. It might start like the bookends. I think actually start in season 2 of the show, but the story proper begins when she's a teenager. So that feeling is appropriate, I think.
Yeah, I think it's sort of bookended by the night before the pilot or the first episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah. So
it's right up against the second season.
pretty solid. Yeah. And you enjoyed it. Now, I know that Tilly hasn't been your most favorite character. So did you see anything in the book that gave you a renewed sense of appreciation for her?
No. I mean, I feel the same.
Okay.
I mean, which is positive. I like her. But yeah, I liked her before. So
yeah.
I can't say that it changed my opinion.
Sure. Well, we'll do a deep dive into that book at some point in the future because it definitely warrants discussion, I think. Cicero, my friend.
Yes. I thought you were going to say more stuff. Yeah. So briefly, you know what I've been doing in Trek? I've been watching the renewed adventures of TNG in the form of the Orville.
Yeah, I've been doing that too.
So so the Orville went from an oddity to a thing that made me cringe to a show that I genuinely love and appreciate for its reverence to Star Trek.
I'm right there with you, man.
And the for all of the people that all of the naysayers about this is not my Trek when they talked about Discovery, their Trek is alive and well in the Orville.
Sure.
In all of those serialized or procedural basically stories that they wind up having in the Orville. But it's great. They've actually had their own Tyler moment with a character named Lieutenant Tyler. Which was pretty kind of which is pretty kind of crazy, where they had a character that pretended to be human but actually was their enemy. I forget what the enemy species is.
The Krill.
The Krill. That's right. Yes, and all to trick the captain Ed. Like, I don't know his last name because all the crew calls him Ed. So, so they had
Mercer.
Yes. Ed, yes, Captain Mercer. So they went ahead and had their own version of subterfuge and double agentry and all this other jazz with Lieutenant Tyler. So I thought that was funny when it happened. I was like, oh man. But the show is great. So that's my Star Trek is the Orville.
Yeah, the Orville's a big hit in this house too. I've been. You're absolutely right. It brings back the sort of done in one singularly episodic nature that was prevalent in the Star Trek shows of the '90s. And I mean, there are production personnel that are involved,
Right.
not the least of whom being Brandon Braga is involved in bringing the Orville
And Jonathan Frakes.
and Jonathan Frakes as a director. Yeah, of course. So yeah, there's a lot to like there. And I think, Cicero, you help prove that it need not be binary. You don't need to choose one or the other.
Oh, absolutely not.
You can absolutely love both. And
Crazy talk.
Right.
well, it's fun though. It's fun that you can see an example of something that's rooted in Star Trek's past, but you also get to see on the same day, no less.
Right.
If you know, both shows drop new episodes on Thursdays now, and you get to see the franchise's future. And
Well, and you know, not just that. You know what I appreciate so much. First of all, you can tell that Seth MacFarlane just adores the Next Generation.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I love the fact that he's at a point where he probably knows this is the most cachet I will ever have with this studio.
Right.
And he's able to be like, you know what I want to do? I want to do a giant Next Generation cosplay, and I want you all to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I mean, think about that. It's like, that's one of those things where you say in your head, like, if I had $1 gazillion, I'd make my own Star Wars movie and star in it.
Right.
yeah.
And that's
true.
him. He's like, I want to be the captain of my own Star Trek ship.
Right. And I want Adrienne Palicki to be my ex-wife.
Yeah, no, I mean, the point is definitely well taken. It's just a good show. I mean, it started.
Yeah.
I think there was definitely, like, in the early going of it, confusing messaging about what exactly it was. Like,
Yeah.
is it going to be a raunchy Star Trek? And it has raunchy elements of the humor, but they're very light compared with sort of the ideas that it wants to push forward, which is very much in sort of a TNG mold, which I really appreciate. But I mean, I laughed out loud when a porn virus screwed up the entire computer system on the ship.
You know that would happen, though.
It probably would. It probably would. Yeah. But no, the Orville's great. That's also been a part of what I've been up to, but mostly just taking in the back catalog of Trek when I can. Reading some, I finished out the Boldly Go series that IDW was publishing for a while, and it's no longer being published anymore. But that was a great series. It's hard to say where the Kelvin timeline is going to go in any medium now. Apparently comics aren't even reliable to continue it anymore. So
I think we're done. I think that era is over, and I raise a glass for it.
Yeah. Hey, and you know, Alex Kurtzman, I think in an interview related to I think it was on the red carpet for Discovery, even if I'm remembering correctly, but he alluded to the idea that those movies were right for that time. And maybe if they're done, then they're done. But you know, it's interesting that the franchise is kind of up in the air when it comes to where it could go in the movies. But at least, unlike the last time it was up in the air, we have an aim on television again,
right,
which I can't complain about.
You know, a friend of mine pointed this out, and it's just an amusing observation or a depressing observation, but how the 3 Kelvin movies coincide exactly with the Obama presidency.
Oh my God.
Because first year, last year, I mean, it's like it came in with Obama and it left with Obama, you know?
That is kind of depressing now that you...
and so did Hope.
That's true.
And with that,
Right.
well, we do have some news items that we want to talk about before we get into our episode discussion proper. So let's do that first. So first up, in a discussion with The Hollywood Reporter, series showrunner Alex Kurtzman talked about the larger theme of faith that will be prevalent in Star Trek Discovery's second season. Specifically, he said, quote, "Initially, it started as a conversation about the way in which Trek has dealt with the issue of faith versus science. In the original series, religion doesn't exist, yet faith is something that has always been a major topic in different ways. The idea of this mystery that has no answer immediately suggests a presence or force greater than anything anyone has ever known. It was really intriguing to us, end quote. Now, obviously, we'll dive into our more specific thoughts when it comes to our first glimpse of the so-called Red Angel, but I thought Kurtzman's quote here brought up an interesting talking point. How effective do you guys think that Star Trek has been in discussing the importance of faith to the human condition in the past? And adding on to that, what ways do you think that question is ripe for exploration in the future? Rachel?
Ugh, I'm just bored. That sounds boring.
Why?
Because I don't care.
You love Deep Space Nine, and that was a core theme of that show.
Yeah, it's been done.
Has it been done? Has it been done so completely that there's nothing left to explore with it?
I don't think it's sort of something that exploring is very interesting, because I think people have their own minds about it.
Yeah.
And they don't really want to change, right? I don't.
No, but I mean, faith, regardless of its source, whether you're talking about a faith in a god or faith in people or belief system, is integral to a person's constitution. No pun intended.
Okay.
So, I mean, just that sheer fact is not enough to at least intrigue you in the possibility?
I don't know. Faith and science are not in opposition to one another.
True.
So, I don't know. Just even the terminology, faith versus science, is.
But we don't know what the
irritating.
conclusion is going to be that the show ultimately takes at the end of the season. Maybe it could come to that conclusion.
Okay, that would be nice.
See, this is what happens when you talk about this with a very strict scientist who is agnostic at best, and who doesn't.
But there are very religious scientists that I know.
Yeah, sure.
So that has nothing to do.
But
with
you
it.
are not
It's
one of
just-
them.
No, but it's I don't think that you certainly don't have to make a choice with that, and I think that the idea that you have to reject certain parts of science if you're going to be a person of faith is it gives faith very little credit.
Mm-hmm.
Because
So if the show makes you pick one, then you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's just, I guess it depends on whether it makes me think. These things tend to be so simplistic is a problem, is that I just find them dull, because it's some of the basic philosophy 101
well, I know that
nonsense, and it's just okay,
when it comes to this franchise, I know that you were disappointed that it basically turned that conflict into something physical at the end of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, I don't like the end of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, you thought it got weird.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know, maybe you guys feel differently about that. Zaki, what do you think about this?
I'm willing to give it a shot, but I mean, the problem generally is when you pose these type of questions is that the questions are, have a long life, but the answers don't, right? There's no way to answer them in a satisfying way.
Mm-hmm.
So it reminds me of Shatner being like, oh, we're going to have the Enterprise meet God, and Harv Bennett's critique of that was, well, the problem with that log line is the solution is in the thing. You're like, as a viewer, well, they're not going to answer. They're not going to actually meet God.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And to me, that's why I'm not skeptical, but I'm like, well, let's see what they come up with, because yeah, sure, the questions are eternal. I would agree with Rachel that I think the notion of science v faith being the framework through which we use the universe is to some extent a false dichotomy. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious, Gene Roddenberry created an a-religious universe.
Right.
And by design, because he was not a person of faith, as far as my understanding. However, I think the notion that in 300 years people will suddenly no longer be religious sort of flies in the face of human history. So to some extent, Star Trek, like that's like one of the main fantasies in the Star Trek universe,
Right.
right? So
Right.
so when I appreciate that they're sort of acknowledging that, well, this is a thing that's part of the human experience and it needs to be dealt with. But again, it's like, how are they going to deal with it? That's what I'm curious to see.
Yeah, Captain Picard was even openly hostile to the idea of placing blind faith in a deity several times
Right.
over the
Right.
course of the Next Generation. How well did you think, or how well didn't you think Deep Space Nine handled these questions over the course of its entire run?
I think Deep Space Nine dealt with it with a degree of nuance that I appreciated. Yeah, I mean, there's, for example, Who Watches the Watchers in the Next Generation, which I love. It's a great episode, but it is that sense of like, oh, we've left behind this kind of Stone Age thinking, very sort of, there's a colonial mindset to it. Whereas what Deep Space Nine presents is, I think, a more educated way of saying, well, what can I learn from this thing that I don't know? And we see Captain Sisko, he's initially reticent to be viewed as the emissary, but that identity gives him more than it takes away from him. I mean, he becomes a richer person by virtue of his love and appreciation of Bajoran religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
very true. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Cicero, what do you think about this this question, and what other ideas sort of come up in your head when it comes to Star Trek specifically trying to present them, answer them, or even just deliberate about them?
Well, Chris, so I think about two things that have been discussed, and specifically one thing that you said, and the thing that you said that really kind of stuck with me was their interpretation of faith. And we are kind of taking it for granted that faith will always mean religious. There is some sort of religious faith is the thing that we're really thinking about automatically when you think of faith. But it could be faith in teammates, faith in your society, faith in the dogma that is whatever the belief system, the belief system of Starfleet and the UFP. That could be it. But it could also be faith. And, what's interesting about Star Trek is that faith didn't really become or religion didn't become a thing until they until Klingons were on the bridge.
Sure.
Because even we knew that Klingons were religious, but we always considered them barbarians. And the other thing to think about is that religion within the confines of Star Trek historically, the not even secularism, it's more like kind of atheism. At this unified atheism is only observed by Western civilizations. Even in a global world, it's only observed by Western civilizations, i.e. white people. And case in point, Chakotay fully embraced his Native American side and their religious beliefs.
Sure.
And all of the alien species that were aboard any of the ships were fully able to celebrate their deities and their customs. And we spent a lot of time learning and discovering those things over the course of, many different series over many different seasons. But Judeo-Christian religion, Western religion, basically we've been told that we've grown beyond that, and everyone else, by virtue of the fact that they have these goofy things that they believe in, are I don't want to say that, but are, I guess, viewed as less than.
It's a little bit like a noble savage kind of thing.
Right. Yes.
Where it's like, well, the white people should know better.
Right.
Yeah, that's a interesting point.
Mm-hmm. No, that's very well articulated. I mean, I don't really have. I guess when I think about this question as it's posed in terms of Discovery, well, I mean, you can go back and you could look at other depictions of religious faith throughout the franchise, and I think Star Trek pretty fairly runs the gamut of perspectives. Like, there's the more outwardly hostile that Captain Picard exhibited, that he thought stunted a society's advancement. But then within that same show, you also see religious faith become a source of true inner strength for Worf. And that was a very positive depiction about what that added to his life and what he tried to pass on to his son, and how it helped to form his own identity, even when he didn't grow up among other Klingons.
Klingon religion. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Cicero, you mentioned the closeness that had to Chakotay's character, which I think is important. Obviously, you have Major Kira, who, you know, the actual organization that housed the Bajoran religion was shown to be at times corrupt and opportunistic, but it never really indicted the larger swath of the Bajoran people who believed in the prophets. So that brings up a very relevant conversation about what those kinds of institutions can do to a society. But then you look at Discovery, and really the only major sort of depiction of religion on the show that we've seen was through T'Kuvma. And it paints a very interesting perspective when you look at the trajectory that the Klingon faith apparently goes to from T'Kuvma to the 24th century, when Worf was a practicing believer in Kahless. And in those early episodes of Discovery, when we were learning about the ideals that the followers of T'Kuvma had, it wasn't a particularly positive image, because it was a radicalized form of religion that gave rise to xenophobic and nationalistic, if you want to call it that, more like planetistic, offshoot of Kronos. And I think there's a lot of room for Discovery to explore the other side of that, if the sort of religious aspect is what they're going for. But either way, because of the importance of any kind of faith to the human condition and the human experience, the human adventure, as Star Trek might say, there's a lot of room here that I think we can't completely anticipate, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it unfolds over the course of the show. Any final thoughts on this topic?
I will just say that I was thoroughly enjoying the repartee between yourself and Rachel. If you guys made that a podcast, I would listen to that all the time.
Just record our arguments around the house.
Some of them would be more interesting than others. I think that's pretty fair to say.
You got to have a couple of very special episodes.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the next news item, it's not really a topic of deliberation. It's just something that I wanted to point out. One of the ways that I was happy to see this first episode of season 2 embrace Star Trek's lineage was in an Easter egg on Captain Pike's service record, which made mention of the Okuda Award. Michael and Denise Okuda are, of course, two very important behind-the-scenes Star Trek personnel who worked in various capacities on the 90s TV shows and movies, but they also helped co-write the incredible Star Trek Encyclopedia, which for all intents and purposes when I was a kid was my Bible, even when I was going to confirmation classes in a Lutheran church. So I was really, really happy to see them get that nod. Zaki, what do you... I don't know if you follow the Okudas on a regular basis, but you've got to have a perspective on what they bring to the franchise in general.
Oh yeah, I mean, gosh, like when I think about the '90s, kind of that era in the '90s, pre-Memory Alpha, online and stuff. I mean, everything that we got as fans that was sort of official was shaped by the Okudas. So the encyclopedia and the chronology and all. I mean, I don't even remember how many times I checked out the Star Trek chronology from my high school library, and just appreciating the level of nerdery that went into making this thing cohere. You know, and I remember reading about how the entire chronology was built on the mention in the Neutral Zone episode of Next Generation. It was the first time where there was an actual date.
Yeah.
And every single thing front and back was basically built out from that single date. And I just remember being so fascinated by that, you know?
That's incredible. And of course, it just speaks to the attention to detail that they brought to the equation. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I would just refer to the Star Trek encyclopedia just on a whim to find out everything that I possibly could about this shared world that I love so much. And in many ways, that was one of the best teachers of absorbing something productively in a world of even though it wasn't probably particularly productive for my schoolwork necessarily.
Right.
The Star Trek encyclopedia did help give me a sense of understanding just how information and history works, weirdly enough. I mean, I was exposed to it that early. And so I was just really happy to see the Okudas get a nod here. It was
I hear you.
really cool. One other thing I wanted to mention that is not on the outline that's in front of you guys right now. Trek Movie had a report that says CBS All Access had a record-breaking weekend fueled by Star Trek Discovery's second season premiere. They announced that the season premiere and the AFC Championship game drove a record-breaking weekend for CBS All Access. So according to CBS, All Access added more subscribers in a single weekend than ever before, eclipsing the previous record set during the 2017 series premiere for Discovery by 72%.
Wow.
In addition, the weekend also set a new record for unique viewers. So really, and Trek Movies report, they include some graphs from Parrot Analytics that shows other popular streaming shows on different services. Interestingly enough, the most wanted digital originals in the United States across all streaming platforms is actually led by DC Universe with Titans and Young Justice, followed by Stranger Things, then You on Netflix, and then Star Trek Discovery. So it's up there. It's above Narcos,
Wow.
Black Mirror. It's above The Punisher. It's above The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And it's above Daredevil. So
Wow.
Star Trek Discovery seems to be doing CBS All Access a whole lot of favors. Guys, as we are now into season 2, and we can now review sort of the long-lived perspective that we've all had with the service, what's your perspective on the value that you gleaned from CBS All Access that's, of course, driven by getting access to Star Trek? Cicero?
Well, I told you guys before, there were already things, there was already a reason for me to have this service. Me and my partner are huge Big Brother fans. So when Big Brother is on, they have access to live feeds, so you can watch these people like they're animals in a zoo 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so you have unfettered access to them via CBS All Access. So if it weren't for Star Trek, if it weren't for Discovery, I wouldn't have purchased the service. But I keep the service because I can watch people.
Yeah, I remember you said you said a while ago that you were thinking of going to the annual plan. Is that something that you did?
I did not. I have not done it yet. I'll probably just do it. You know.
Well, I mean, we got a lot to look forward to. I think.
I mean, you know, it's just I just got to make sure that I don't do it the same month that my Prime subscription is up.
Yeah, no kidding. Netflix, Amazon, CBS, DC, we're not made of money. This stuff is there's gonna be a balloon that pops pretty soon, I think, when it comes to this stuff. But time will tell. Zaki, now that you've had more time with CBS All Access, what do you make of the service sort of in the off season now that we prepare for more Star Trek?
I mean, it's good to have access to so much content. I have to be honest. I pretty much only use it for the new stuff.
Sure.
You guys know I'm big into Hawaii Five-0, but I watch that through Netflix. But as more and more content that I'm interested in increases, well, I mean, the value speaks for itself. I mean, I said this before, like if you're a Star Trek fan, well, you paying a couple bucks a month to get new Star Trek content, the way people be complaining online, like it's some punishment from on high. It's like, if you like Star Trek, like, you know what I mean? Like, people spend more per month on comic books and stuff.
Yep. Guilty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's well said. Rachel, you've been pretty critical of our continued patronage of CBS All Access. I know that we didn't really use it much in the off season, but now that we're on the cusp of, we have Picard coming, we have the Twilight Zone coming in particular. What are your feelings?
I would like it if they added some more content. I mean, maybe just to get my money's worth, I'm gonna have to start watching all of NCIS.
Oh, good God, no.
There are, and I don't want to sound like a shill for CBS All Access, but there are some shows on CBS All Access that are worth checking out. There is a remake of an Australian series that is two cops on a stakeout, and it's starring, oh crap, I can't think of who it is, but it's two cops on a stakeout, and basically they just ad-lib the entire thing, and the entire series takes place with these cops on the stakeout. And like, that's all they're doing. Nothing ever really happens. So like, you're sitting around and you're trying to figure out what's happening. It's a very weird comedy, but that's exactly what it's supposed to be.
Sure. Well, hey, I mean, whatever can add that kind of value is fine with me. I'm generally fine with CBS All Access, but I've always looked at it as sort of a future kind of investment.
Sure.
As we get more Star Trek and as Twilight Zone gets a little bit closer. That's supposed to be later this year. So I'm interested to see what else they roll out, most definitely. Let's see. One last news item before we dive into our episode discussion is that IDW Publishing, who've released a plethora of great Star Trek comics since first picking up the license in 2007, will be publishing a new series called Star Trek Year 5, aiming to give us a look at the final year of the Enterprise's 5-year mission under Captain Kirk. The synopsis reads, quote, "As Starfleet's flagship returns home, the series will investigate how each member of the iconic crew feels about the uncertain future that awaits them as they reach Earth." No word yet on a release date, but it's nice to have some new adventures of the classic crew to look forward to. Zaki is another guy who's patronized Star Trek comics. What do you think of this just as a concept? Obviously, it's been explored in other places and even in other comics, but is this something that interests you at all?
I mean, in a peripheral sense, I'm interested, but as you say, I mean, it's like, we've done this before. We've done it a few times.
Yeah.
And I don't mind. I mean, it's cool, but I think to some extent, one problem I've always had with licensed fiction, specifically about the original crew era, is that it's all kind of frozen in amber, like right. It doesn't really count, quote unquote, and it's there. So it's like, well, as I've gotten older, I find I'm just less interested in reading novels set in that era or comics set in that era.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, IDW did, it's been a while now, gosh, since 2019, but back in 2008, they did a series called Year 4. That incorporated some aspects of the animated series, and I think DC Fontana had a hand in writing it.
That's right.
But it just kind of fell by the wayside. It wasn't. I don't even really remember any particulars about the stories told in those issues. So, yeah, I tend to agree with you. I'll probably pick up the first one to give it a shot, but my expectations are generally kind of low, even though I do like most of IDW's recent Star Trek output specifically. Their Discovery stuff has been great. But we will, as in all things, we will see. Now, though, it's time. Guys, let's begin our discussion of Star Trek Discovery Season 2, Episode 1, Brother. Now, just in case you guys have forgotten, the way that we usually do this is I will read portions of the episode's plot, and we will then discuss as we go through different aspects of the plot. We'll sort of segment the story of each episode out and discuss sort of in the middle. That's how we've done things before. As a reminder, Discovery Debrief is meant as a supplement to the watching experience, not a replacement of the watching experience. So if you have not already watched Brother, then please do so before you listen to this discussion. Otherwise, you'll be spoiled to hell and back. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, beginning years before the primary events of the episode, we flash back to young Michael Burnham's arrival at the home of Ambassador Sarek and Amanda Grayson on Vulcan. Young Michael is intrigued by the only other child in the house, Sarek and Amanda's son, Spock. When Michael is introduced to Spock by his parents, the young Vulcan conjures up a terrifying holographic drawing he made before slamming the door in her face. So there's very little here, I think, for us to grab onto and pick apart. I think the best way to approach the early going of the episode here is just to ask you guys a simple question. With everything we know concerning Michael's past and Spock's turbulent childhood and how the relationships that both of them have with Sarek, which are very, very different, surprisingly so, in fact. Right. How did the confluence of all these things make you feel when you just watched this episode for the first time? Zaki, you know an immense number of details about Spock and his early life. You've watched Michael from the beginning of this show. How did this all come together in this scene for you?
I really like it. People have been critical of this sort of continuity implant where, oh my gosh, here's Spock's sister that we never heard about. But, I haven't seen anything thus far that really trips up anything we've known about Spock thus far. Mm-hmm. And I really think it's a smart idea to have Michael so intimately tied in with Spock, because it gives us kind of a shorthand, because we already know Sarek, we already know Amanda. Mm-hmm. And so when you say, oh, she was raised by Sarek and Amanda, you get a sense of what her upbringing was like. Mm-hmm. And, it's something that, to be honest, I wish they had leaned into it a little bit more earlier on, because I think it would have given us a sense, earlier in exactly who she is.
Sure. Yeah. Very well said. Cicero, how did this all come together for you here in the beginning?
Well, I would say first and foremost, I think one thing that you missed is that Michael Burnham uttered 4 little words that mean so much. Space, the final frontier.
Very true. That is absolutely fair.
And that moment for me was like, I had chills. Like, oh, holy Vulcan Spock. We're about to get it on. She has officially, stamped her place in Star Trek lore, Star Trek as a television series. Once you said that, you're in the fraternity now. And so now Michael Burnham's part of that fraternity, and that's amazing.
Yes.
So outside of that, the relationship between Spock and Burnham, we'll see where that goes. I've got some thoughts. I'm not sure if I want to share them. Okay. But like, at least from the beginning, I agree with Zaki. The fact that they tied her into Sarek and Amanda's family made some of her background instantly more intriguing and relatable for us as longtime fans.
Excellent. Yes, definitely agree. Rachel.
I mean, I was a little kind of anxious because I anticipated what was going to happen. I was like, he's not going to be cool with it. He's going to be difficult. Yeah. Spock seems like he would be a difficult child.
Well, it's a very tumultuous childhood. Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, I don't have anything more intelligent to say than that.
Okay.
Sorry.
You don't need to apologize if that's how you felt. No, I mean, I certainly can't. Spock is obviously an extraordinarily important character to the larger franchise, but he is a very important character to me. So I'm going to be looking at anything that adds to his history very, very closely. But yeah, I mean, what Zaki said is absolutely true. This doesn't step on the toes of anything we know.
Right.
That stuff, I mean, really, the point in time that Discovery is going to be playing with, because we know that more substantive appearances of Spock are coming. But really, that the time period leaves plenty of room for us to learn more about the man that Spock will become, and perhaps we'll even see experiences that might inform what his character was like later in life. So I'm really interested to see how Spock is going to be leveraged in this season. But really, with this, it was very consistent with what I understand Spock's tumultuous early life to be. We never got the sense that he didn't resent his father. This early of an age, there might be some questions about why he feels the way that he does. But Sarek has always been very strict with Spock, from what we understand. I mean, even I think the earliest perspective that we might have is even, just from a firsthand source, when Sarek was describing to Captain Picard the ways that Spock would behave as a child, and he didn't say that Spock was very well behaved. So this is pretty consistent with what we know, and I'll be interested to see exactly how that is shaped going forward. So let's move along with the plot. En route to the planet Vulcan to pick up its new captain following the betrayal of Gabriel Lorca during the Federation Klingon War, the USS Discovery receives a distress call from the USS Enterprise. Captain Christopher Pike takes emergency command of the Discovery and explains that the Enterprise was investigating 7 mysterious signals when it was catastrophically damaged. All but one of the signals have disappeared, and after establishing himself as a very different flavor of commanding officer from the conniving Lorca, Pike orders Discovery to leave the Enterprise behind and head towards the only remaining red burst signal. So the time has finally come. We get our first substantive look at Anson Mount's portrayal of Captain Christopher Pike, and he decides to use his introduction as a moment of reassurance that he is not going to be anything like the ship's previous commander. Guys, what do you think of Anson Mount's Pike, and how do you think he sets the tone for the Starfleet side of things this season as we go further? Cicero, Captain Pike, how does he strike you here?
Anson Mount. Can you, like, is there a gif of me propped up on a bed, kicking my heels up, staring lovingly up at the screen? Man, it was so good. It was so good immediately. Like, from word one, it was just perfect. All of the doubts that you may have had about picking one actor over another, or if Anson Mount is the right guy, or what, just oozing with charisma. And it really goes to show how much was lost in the horrible Inhumans. I'm glad he was able to salvage his career from that turd. Oh my gosh. It was just fantastic. Oh man, I'm so fanboying over Captain Pike and Anson Mount's portrayal. But I'm nervous, y'all. I'm sorry. This show has they have done it to me. It was just a little too convenient that that Captain Pike was around. Like, I want to believe that it's Captain Pike, but I just think that it's like it's positive mirror universe Captain Pike, You know, like there's the positive universe, positive mirror universe. That's a good place. Where Prime is the medium place, and regular mirror universe is the bad place. I just he was everything. He was roguish. He was charming. He was personable. He was in command and approachable all at the same time.
Yeah.
Authoritative and approachable at the same time. It was fantastic.
Very well said. Rachel, you've had a lot of thoughts about Anson Mount over the last several months.
What are my thoughts?
Well, he's a super handsome man.
That he is,
yeah,
Chris.
but
that he is.
I mean, you know Captain Pike. What do you make of Anson Mount as Captain Pike?
Yeah, so like I was super brief with my last answer because I don't want to talk about any of that crap. I just want to talk about Captain Pike for like an hour. Just talk about it.
Okay, go for it.
He's so great.
Yeah.
And he's so folksy. Like he's got all his like folksy wisdom. Like thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's starship. It was fantastic. He makes you feel so good. I'm so glad like mommy Discovery has married a new stepdad, a new dad, and he's really nice.
Yeah.
He calls us all sport.
Right.
It seems like he would call you sport and like play baseball with you.
Yeah.
So.
Excellent. Yeah. Very positive impression here. Zaki, you're on a Captain Pike kick, so to speak. So how did you take in this new performance?
Well, first of all, as soon as I heard he had been cast, I was like, oh my gosh, perfect. Because yes, The Inhumans was not a great show. And yes, Anson Mount did not say much or anything on that show, but he was so good even when like just his presence was such that I was like, he's got the look, he's got the persona, and he was great on Hell on Wheels too. I think what's so kind of brilliant is that if you're a deep diving Star Trek fan, which this show is to some extent aimed at, then the mere presence of Captain Pike carries with it an ominous sense of foreboding, because you know what is going to happen to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the genius of how easily Anson Mount just slips into the role and becomes so likable and so charismatic and just somebody you want to follow is that his performance is so good that it reaches back in time and makes the menagerie even more heartbreaking.
Oh, sure.
And I think that's the genius of what he accomplished here.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot I can add to that. I just I think the thing that comes to my mind immediately, particularly in the way that Captain Pike establishes himself with Discovery's crew, of all things, it reminded me of a moment in, I think it was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix in the book, where there's a big battle between the good wizards and the evil wizards, I think in the bowels of the Ministry, if I'm remembering correctly. And all is apparently lost. But then Dumbledore shows up, and I'll never forget just reading in all italics, Harry's thoughts was, "We are saved." And that's what comes to my mind with Captain Pike here, because the crew has been through so much. They've been betrayed. It was not a moment of, I guess, deconstruction of their philosophies. If anything, it reinforced it. But now they're given a chance to work with a commander who shares their value sets. Doesn't hurt that he's one of the most decorated captains in Starfleet, and he is a firm but reassuring presence. You know, I mean, he gets a little pissed off in this episode when he thinks that the crew is coming up with excuses not to do something, but it comes from a place of genuine care and concern that a good captain is supposed to have. And I think that's what predominantly comes to my mind when I think at least of the earliest appearance of Captain Pike in this episode is they are saved. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that shapes up going forward.
Before we move on, I have a question for everyone. Is Anson Mount's portrayal of Captain Pike the definitive Captain Pike for you now? Zaki.
That's a really good question. I think if only because in just one episode he's logged more screen time than Bruce Greenwood, and in one more episode he'll have logged more screen time than Jeffrey Hunter. In terms of volume, he's gonna lap everybody else. But I don't think he's doing something that's that different. I mean, it's both what Bruce Greenwood did and Jeffrey Hunter did are woven into what Anson Mount is doing here. So I have no problem believing that this is the same man who was in the cage.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the cage was kind of it was clearly an important moment in Pike's life, and it got him a little pissed off. I think it's fair to say. I mean, I think there was more than one moment in the cage where he literally said the phrase "tear your head off." But but no, I mean, it certainly has that potential. I don't know if it's there yet, but I can definitely see how it could get there.
Rachel?
Well, in the cage, doesn't he at one point say he doesn't like having a woman on the bridge or something like that?
Yeah, he says that to number one, though.
Yeah. So I'm assuming they've made some modifications to his character to reflect the fact that women are allowed in professional spaces.
This brings up when we had the conversation related to the book, though. You were asking me about why the cage wasn't picked up. And one of the reasons was that NBC executives were uneasy about a woman second in command of the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
There's just times they are a-changing, you know?
It only took 50 years.
Yeah, that's a whole rabbit hole. But yeah, I mean, the mid-century was a particularly repressive time for women in the workplace. So I don't begrudge anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever, you were wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm assuming that they've modified his character so it doesn't have that part of it. So to me, like, I see a lot more of the Kelvin timeline Pike in Anson Mount's performance than Jeffrey Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But that's fine with me.
We got a lot of time left with him.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, maybe when he's more grumpy or depressed, he's more like Jeffrey Hunter.
Maybe. Yeah, we will see. Good question, Cicero.
Oh, thanks. I learned by watching you.
Oh, now. All right. Well, moving along with the plot, after an interaction between Commander Stamets and Ensign Tilly, in which Stamets reveals he'll be leaving Discovery for a new teaching endeavor on Vulcan, Discovery arrives at the burst's location and finds nothing. It's gone. In its place, they find the wreckage of the USS Hiawatha, which went missing during the war, on an asteroid made of non-baryonic matter. Tilly asks Burnham for a sample of the asteroid due to its interactions with the ship's spores, before Burnham joins Captain Pike, Commander Nhan, and Lieutenant Connolly, all having come to Discovery from the Enterprise, as they attempt to traverse a dangerous planetary asteroid field in order to board the Hiawatha and save the Starfleet personnel that could be trapped inside. Against Burnham's warnings, Connolly performs maneuvers that are too dangerous since he's relying on sensor information, and his refusal to heed Burnham's advice causes him to crash into an asteroid fragment and die instantly. Well, what a twist! Huh?
Shocking. I was...
What a paradigm twist. The blue shirt ate it in the episode. I don't think many people were really crying about it, though, considering what we saw from...
I was like, when he was on screen, I was like, why is this guy such an asshole? And then as soon as he was in danger, I was like, oh, okay.
Well, Well, I thought that it was just the interaction was interesting. What did you guys make of it, particularly in the way that it subverted a popular franchise expectation? I mean, it seemed like they were kind of telegraphing the idea that Commander Nan would be at risk, but that didn't happen. But what did you make of the just maybe even just the message that Lieutenant Connolly did not heed the advice of Commander Burnham, and it resulted in him kicking it? Cicero?
Well, first and foremost, if you don't listen to your hero, right? You know, if they're number one on the call sheet and they tell you to do something, then you do that. Because if you don't, you will die.
Yes.
and that's what happened there. But the other thing that I think was important to mention was that they spent a lot of time setting up the red shirt thing. And so of course they were gonna pull the subterfuge, because it was, and it is something that I said on Twitter on Zaki's page, but this episode was probably the most Easter eggy season premiere of anything I've ever seen. You know, they were just Easter eggs abound. So you get the red shirt thing where Captain Pike tells Commander Nan to get her red shirt on because she's coming with us on this dangerous mission. So you're like, okay, I know what that is. We've got Saru and Burnham on the way to the transporter to welcome the boarding party from the Enterprise onto the Discovery, asking Burnham asking Saru if Saru had any family when they were having their conversation, and Saru says, "Oh, I've got a sister," which we now know about because we watched the Brightest Star short trek.
Right.
The fortune that was left in old Lorca's ready room was a callback. Wasn't that a callback to Desperate Hours?
Oh, hey, that's definitely going to be a discussion point.
Right. Oh, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah.
Just telling you.
Yeah.
Just telling you.
Okay. But you know, so I mean, there were Easter eggs abound, and I think that with the red shirt one, it was just like, hey guys, we're trekkers too. You know, we're fans of this franchise, and we just want to let you know it's in good hands, and you know, just buckle up and enjoy the ride. So kudos to them.
Excellent. Rachel, what did you think of Lieutenant Connolly's fate?
I really like that he got killed while mansplaining.
Yes.
So that was just a little Schadenfreude on my part. Just like, yeah, you should have listened to Michael.
Yeah, probably should have. Well said. Zaki?
Yeah, no, I'll co-sign what Rachel said. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
And I saw after the fact too that there was a blue shirted crew member on the cage that people think that Lieutenant Connolly might have been.
Huh.
No confirmation to that as of yet, but I'll be interested to see if that's something that the show establishes. Well, we also get a little more service to the Stamets-Culber relationship, even though the good doctor is still dead as far as we know. What did you guys make of Stamets' desire to leave behind Discovery? Did you find the emotion of the scene easy to get caught up in, or does this feel like it's planting a possible seed of diversion? Zaki, what do you think?
I mean, I have to imagine that is just planting a seed. You know, I don't think that particular storyline is over yet.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Rachel, did you get caught up in this, or do you think it's just kind of telegraphing something that will be bigger later?
I mean, I think it's trying to remind us that Stamets exists because he has some part to play later.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I got from it.
Yeah, sure. Cicero?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it can be both, right? Because, yeah, sure, I bought into it. Like the love of his life died on this ship. There, like he said, he's everywhere he goes, so he wants to escape that. That makes sense. But also, Stamets just got promoted. He's a commander now, And that character needs to be around for a while. So, of course, he's going to be around for a while, and they'll figure out a way to make that happen.
Yeah, I certainly hope that they're not, that this isn't leading to some unforeseen exit, but I seriously doubt that that's the case. But yeah, I got caught up in it. I mean, it is a very understandable perspective, so I certainly can't fault anyone for wanting to portray it this way. It's understandable. I mean, how could anyone with a heart? I think you could get caught up in it. That's for sure. So moving along with the plot, getting aboard the Hiawatha, Pike, Burnham, and Non find engineer Jet Reno nursing the last survivors of the crew and keeping them alive through very inventive uses of the ship's systems. All are transported back to the Discovery, but a problem on board causes Burnham to be stranded. Briefly, she has a vision of a figure walking through a red silhouette with bony protrusions that resemble wings while she's on the asteroid. And visibly coming to grips with what she sees, she's abruptly saved by Pike and safely returned to Discovery. Not before attempting to grab an asteroid fragment that Tilly requested, but that fragment failed to dematerialize with her. Discussing the ship's forthcoming mission with Captain Pike in the now former ready room of Captain Lorca's, she learns that Pike will be staying aboard Discovery to investigate the remaining red bursts. Burnham also discusses with Pike their shared acquaintance, Spock, as Pike tells Burnham that Spock took leave and is no longer aboard the Enterprise. Well, first things first, what did you guys make of Engineer Reno? I don't think Tig Notaro missed a beat with that, even though she expressed some nervousness. I think, was she on either the Colbert Show or Conan and talking about how she had trouble getting around the dialogue that she was given. But Cicero, as the resident big Tig Notaro fan, what did you make of this?
Oh, she was awesome. It was fantastic. I was a little disappointed that once we got back to Discovery, we didn't see her again. But I'm hoping that she's around at least for a while. So, yeah, she was awesome.
Yeah, we haven't seen a chief engineer on board Discovery, so who knows? Maybe there's potential there. Zaki, what did you think of Engineer Reno?
She was fun. She reminded me of her intro. Reminded me of Scotty's intro in the 09 movie.
Yeah, good point.
I got shades of that. Kind of just stuck there and making the most of it, and we very quickly get a sense of just how gifted she is.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
Rachel, Engineer Reno.
It's too bad if she won't be in more episodes because I feel like the show is really missing that kind of wizard engineer of the ship.
Mm-hmm. And I liked how she basically alluded to the body as a machine, and that's how she's able to rig all that stuff up. It's just a matter of reading, because she can read in order to do that stuff. No, I got a big kick out of her. I certainly hope that she shows up more in the future. I seem to remember, or at least I thought I remembered, that we haven't actually seen main engineering on the Starship Discovery yet. We've just seen an engineering lab.
Right.
So who knows? Maybe that's a location we'll see, and maybe she'll be the one to be the chief. I certainly wouldn't be against it. We also got our first glimpse of the Red Angel, and it seemed to have quite an effect on Burnham. We don't have much to go on with this brief appearance, but what did you guys make of the way that the Red Angel was portrayed? And again, how did this interaction make you feel, if anything? Rachel?
It made me feel curious, Chris.
Really?
Yeah, like, what is that?
Yeah.
I would like to watch more episodes of Discovery to find out. I don't know. I thought maybe like the Red Angel is some sort of consciousness that was like it set up these like beacon points trying to draw people there. I don't know. Like, it seems like it drew them there to help the Hiawatha, right?
That's what it could seem like. That's one possible interpretation.
Yeah. So that's my hypothesis right now.
Sure. Zaki, the Red Angel, what do you make of it this early on, or do you have much to make of it?
No, I mean, like Rachel. I mean, it's an intriguing thread. Let's see where they go with it.
Cicero, the Red Angel, you have any major thoughts on it?
I suspect that the Red Angel and Commander Spock are intertwined somehow.
Intertwined. Fascinating, to steal a word. We'll have to keep an eye on it. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really get much of an indication about the Red Angel so far, but I think that's by design.
Right.
I did think that it was noteworthy that, you know, the closest that we got to seeing more detail on the Red Angel, that's when Pike showed up immediately. I wonder if there's a sort of symbolic thread about the Red Angel possibly representing a kind of salvation. But that's also, I understand that that's kind of intertwined with the ideas of faith that I know that the season's going to be exploring. So I don't know. I definitely need more information about what the Red Angel is doing, what it means, and how the characters themselves will interpret it. Not the least of whom being Michael and Spock. I think those are going to be the ones that drive things forward the most. All right, pedantic continuity time. Well, not really. I just wanted to pat the writers on the back with their allusion to Captain Pike's future while tying it to the lingering presence of Captain Lorca, the Fortune, as Cicero alluded to before. Not every cage is a prison, not every loss eternal. Since this is the Prime Universe, we know the fate that awaits Christopher Pike. What did you guys make of this allusion? And how do you think the Captain's future could play into the way that he's portrayed over the course of the season? Zaki, first of all, what did you think of the Fortune itself when you first saw it? And how do you think it's the knowledge of the Captain's future is going to play?
I mean, it struck me very clearly as an allusion to what's going to happen to him, and it's meant to add this. It's meant to do it, kind of what I said earlier. You know, we spent this whole hour adventuring with Captain Pike and really being excited, and then we get this little thing that, you know, he reads it, and we know what it means, and he doesn't. And you know, it's meant to kind of just be this little poke where we're like, you know, not every Star Trek story is a happy ending. I mean, I think that's what's, you know, while we were talking, I was pulling up, I pulled up Captain Pike's page on Memory Alpha and just looking at, you know, what ends up happening to him. And that's what strikes me is that the way he is ultimately, you know, crippled for life is reflected in what we see here. He does here in this episode what we know he's going to do later. That's going to end up costing him his mobility.
Yeah. How does he get crippled?
He's on a freighter where the plating ruptures and there's a radiation leak. So he's basically dragging cadets out of the danger area, but the radiation, he's bombarded by delta rays that basically leave him unable to move or communicate except via beeps.
Yeah. I mean, I knew that he was in a beep machine.
Yeah. And he's like disfigured by the rays too.
Like...
So he's doing, you know, exactly what he does for Burnham, right? He beams back to get her. Like that's the characterization that's carried through, and I think that's really cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah, very much so. Cicero, now I know that I think you and I spoke about that it's been a while since the last time you watched TOS. I don't know when the last time you watched The Menagerie was, but I know that you definitely had an inkling of what Captain Pike's future is going to be.
Yes.
So how did this make you feel?
I mean, so immediately how it made me feel was comforted. And the only reason I say that is because the writers knew exactly what they were doing when they did that. And again, as I said earlier, this was their way of telling longtime fans and critics that we know what we're doing. We know the source material.
Yeah.
We've got this. Just trust us. And I think for those naysayers, for those people that are on the fence, because you're always going to get a group of haters. One of the things that I did while we were off during our break to engage with Trek was engage with this podcast again and listen to some of the insights that I'm able to glean from you guys week in and week out. And one of the things that we sat and we talked about is how there is a group of people that will say this Trek isn't Trek, and Enterprise wasn't Trek because it was the last Trek and it was so different, and Deep Space Nine isn't Trek because it's not like my Trek, and TNG wasn't Trek. So Discovery is now getting its turn to be unlike the others, and for a subsection of people that will always be the case. But for those people that are on the fence, please play them this part and tell them to come in, because these are the moments that will reassure you as a Trek fan, as a longtime Trek fan, who you feel like the people that now have your franchise that you hold so dear don't understand and don't love it as much as you do. That's why I feel comforted by that.
Excellent point. Very well said. I'm not surprised at your insight and your expression of it. So thank you for sharing it with us. Rachel, how did this make you feel when you saw the because you actually pointed it out to me. I didn't really realize exactly what it might have been saying, and then I backed it up and read it and went, "Holy crap!" But in the moment, what did this do for you?
Like, wow, that's like a real life magic fortune cookie. It actually told his fortune.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember having any specific feelings other than it added to my positive feelings of the episode because, like Cicero said, there was a lot of kind of inside baseball sort of references, and this was one of them, and so it made me feel very special and happy because I got it.
Yeah, it made me sad. It's interesting. I mean, all of you guys are absolutely correct in your estimations of what this moment meant, just for the character and for the franchise at large. I also appreciate the fact that it alludes to a less than happy ending, because it's all of that knowledge in the moment for those of us who know what happens to Captain Pike. The experience of the episode is automatically and instantly juxtaposed with the fate that we know awaits him. Even though he gets his own sense of a happy ending, ultimately, but he goes through a hell of a road to get there. Right. And so I, as a longtime TOS fan and as someone who has wanted to see more of Captain Pike explored in the franchise, I mean, I'll tell you a little story. It must have been 1996. I think it was early 96. Star Trek was celebrating its 30th anniversary. And I was visiting my grandparents' house in Tehachapi, California. And I got I had my own money. I spent, I think, like $20, and I got the Galileo shuttlecraft that Playmates put out that came with a Where No Man Has Gone Before Captain Kirk figure. Mm. So it had like a Cage style uniform. But while I was at the Kmart in Tehachapi, I saw that they were also selling a Captain Pike figure from the Cage in the same Playmates series. And I bugged the hell out of my grandma because I was like, "Oh, they've got the same uniforms. I've got to have both of them so they could both go into the shuttlecraft and I could do my landing party adventures." And I looked at my grandma and she said, "If we go, will you be quiet? Will you be quiet if we go?" And I said, yes, I'll be quiet if we go. So I was being an obnoxious 6-year-old child and got a Captain Pike figure. But ever since I had that figure and I was playing with the Kirk in that shuttlecraft Galileo, I think I had seen the Cage maybe once on TV back then. And I knew even then I wanted to see more adventures of this guy. And 23 years later, we're now finally getting the chance to, and we're getting a chance to at the behest of a creative team that understands the history and his history in the franchise, that's a really cool opportunity. And I don't think it's going to be wasted. Discovery created an immense sense of confidence in me as a Star Trek fan over the course of its first season, and I see no reason to think that it's going to do anything other than justice to Christopher Pike. Potentially more justice than we've even seen done before, just by, as Zaki alluded to, the wealth of experiences we're about to have with him. So I'm very excited, if you couldn't tell. But so one final point in the plot before we're dismissed to the next week. Before Discovery disembarks, Burnham visits the damaged Enterprise to investigate Spock's quarters. She discovers that he had been having nightmares of the Seven Signals and is horrified to learn that her foster brother is out alone investigating these phenomena. So Burnham seems genuinely concerned for Spock here, but also seems to hold him in an immensely high regard, even given what we know of their past relationship. So let's wind this down, guys, with the revelations we learned in this episode and everything we learned in season 1 about Burnham and everything we've been learning about Spock over the course of the past 5 decades. What is the deal between Burnham and Spock? Just a very basic question to you guys. What's the deal between Burnham and Spock? Rachel, start us.
Oh, I don't know. Probably some sort of like family with Sarek.
Very interesting. Say more.
I don't know. Like maybe I have no idea, Chris. I'm just riffing here.
You just along for the ride.
Something happened, obviously, in the past, and they're gonna address it later.
Well, the reason that I ask it this way specifically is because of the apparent reverence. Like, that's something that genuinely surprised me. Even when she's a child, she looks at him with a degree of reverence, but Saru points out how nervous she is when she thinks she's about to see him for the first time in God knows how many years. Obviously, we know that Sarek hasn't seen Spock in a really long time and potentially won't see him for years to come if they hold that their next interaction is going to be Journey to Babel. Zaki, what do you think is the deal between Burnham and Spock? Obviously, there's a complicated history between the two, but if you had to guess, just given what we know now, what do you think?
I think part of it could well be the dichotomy between them where we know that Spock had a fractious relationship with Sarek, and we know that Michael does not, even now, and so I think there's something to the fact that we have a human child who has in many ways chosen a Vulcan approach to life, and then you have a Vulcan child who is disobeying his father. And so there's that sense of we see it alluded to already, right? Like Amanda is happy to have a human child to take care of. Obviously she loves Spock, but there's something there, she's reading to her and we see Spock looking on, like maybe this is something that's missing from his life. And so I can see it obviously is they're deliberately seeding this in such a way where they want it to play out. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was at the heart or at least part of the heart of whatever, the issue is between them.
Yeah, sure.
That's a more articulate version of what I was trying to say.
Okay. All right.
Always leave it to
Noted.
Zaki.
Cicero, what do you think is going on between these two? I know that you've gravitated a lot towards Michael over the past, year plus. Right. So, seeing, and obviously you like Spock. So what do you think the deal is with their relationship, given what you know about both parties?
So the first thing I'll say is that what Zaki said is probably the most plausible. The one thing that I will say is that in the animated series, Spock said that his mother used to read Lewis Carroll to him as a child. So maybe she didn't read Alice in Wonderland, and maybe she read some of his other books. And that's why, like, maybe he wanted Amanda. Spock wanted Amanda to read Alice in Wonderland to him, like she was doing to Burnham. I don't know. I doubt it's that petty. The one thing that I hope it is not is that we've often made or many people have made kind of drawn parallels between Discovery, the style of Discovery, and Game of Thrones. Let's hope that
I see what you're saying.
we are not dealing with some sibling romantic relationships. So
interesting.
and right, I don't think it'll be that. It's not. There were definitely times where the conversation between Burnham and Sarek was such that it led me to believe that wasn't off the table.
There is something unsaid.
Yeah, about their relationship, and I'm not saying that it's sexual in nature, but romantic in nature. That there was a fondness for each other, in more so than being siblings. Point of fact, when Saru said, doesn't your brother serve on the Enterprise? Burnham was quick to correct him and say foster brother.
That's true.
So I'm not thinking that it's sexual, but I wouldn't be shocked if it wasn't romantic.
That's a really interesting point. I had honestly not considered that. Honestly, the angle that I've been focusing on, I've just kind of been moving in my head back and forth between everything that we know about Spock's relationship specifically with his father in multiple universes, no less. Because the Kelvin timeline conception of Spock and Sarek's relationship, even though we only saw it in that first movie, seems very different than what we've seen in the Prime universe.
Well, wasn't that actually in the Prime universe?
No, it wasn't, because the arrival of Nero, I think immediately, it either coincided or immediately predated Spock's birth. 2233. Spock was probably an infant when it happened, if I'm remembering correctly, but most...
Yeah, because Spock and Kirk are roughly the same age.
So he was really small, but I mean, just the way that they sort of leaned on each other, particularly after the death of Amanda in the 2009 film, and the way that Sarek spoke to Spock when he was a child seemed like it was much more sort of reassuring than we'd seen, at least intimated, in examples of the Prime timeline. But then, you examine up and down the Prime timeline, the relationship between Spock and Sarek, and the best that it probably got, I guess maybe during the movies, when they were talking on a more regular basis. I mean, arguably Sarek was the most effusive in his love of Spock when he went out of his way to help make sure that Spock would live again. Sarek was a pretty important part of that. But the best...
Well, and their conversation at the end of Star Trek IV is sort of puts a button on what the journey that began for audiences with Journey to Babel.
Yes.
Where they're at peace with each other. Tell her I feel fine, and this is a whole Spock who has learned to embrace both sides, and that's reflected in how he is with his father. His father's accepted him.
Excellent point. Yeah, and that's absolutely the case. But then, examining the tragedy that would become of that, even by the time of the 24th century, even something as potentially, I mean, I don't want to say it's trivial, because it wasn't really trivial, but an ambassadorial dispute, I think, over the Cardassians is what pushed them apart again and drove Spock to Romulus. And then he never saw his father again, and didn't really begin to fully comprehend the love that Sarek did have for Spock until that mind meld with Captain Picard. At least that's what it looked like. Spock looked very overcome with emotion when he met the mind of Captain Picard in that instance. So we know, we have the benefit of understanding something that at this point in Spock's life he does not, and that is that his father loves him immensely. And so there is a degree of tragedy when you look at the relationship between Spock and Sarek, and how that could correlate to the relationship between Spock and Michael. Like I said before, I hope it's not the reasoning that the show ultimately gives for Spock never having mentioned Michael. I really hope it's not just rooted in resentment. I hope they take a more interesting and potentially even more complicated path than that. But there's a lot of meat here. I don't know what the deal is. Cicero certainly has an interesting hypothesis that I didn't think of before. But this is, to me, where most of the meat of the season is going to be. I'm really looking forward to seeing Captain Pike, but having a new opportunity to add to the life of the franchise's most iconic pillar character, that's exciting to me. I don't see that as threatening at all. I see that as nothing but an opportunity. So, guys, final thoughts of season 2, episode 1, something that maybe we didn't mention in the discussion if you've had a thought about it. Rachel, what are your final thoughts of the episode, and what do you think it portends for the season?
The back 10 minutes of the episode were way too crowded and fast for me. I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, fair enough.
There were some pacing issues with the writing that it would just cram too much stuff into the last half of the episode, I guess.
Okay.
So, yeah. I don't know.
But you're looking forward to things generally?
Oh, yeah, sure. Just that made me worry because that's what they did at the end of last season too. Right. So it's like there seems to be a recurring thing with these writers where they sort of
run out
speed through plot points in a way that doesn't feel like they're letting, let the plot breathe a little bit, please.
Right. Well, they said as much that they're working backwards from the way that they wanted the season to end. So hopefully that'll make for a better landing this time, because I think we all thought that the season finale last time was a little bit clunky. But Cicero, final thoughts on the season premiere and thoughts on the season going forward.
Those uniforms, snazzy. I really like those. Those were really, really nice. And of course, really quick one-liner, explain their new uniforms, boom, done. There's a question down the line about whether or not the Discovery crew, if we get additional seasons, will convert over to those new uniforms, but we'll ask that later. The other big takeaway from this was we lament the loss of the movies potentially, but damn, the effects on this show are I mean, we don't need big budget, big screen Trek, because we've got movie quality Trek right here. The stunts in the second half that moved at a breakneck speed were just fantastic. That entire scene where they're flying the ships through the asteroid field when Connolly bites it, the effects there were fantastic. Burnham running through the fire, sitting still on the ship. I mean, all of that stuff was just amazing.
Yeah, very true. Good point.
Yeah.
Zaki, final thoughts on this episode and thoughts on the season going forward.
It's a solid start, and let's boldly go.
Well said. Yeah. My final thoughts, I guess, I'm really looking forward to seeing these sort of Cage characters and Enterprise characters, but honestly, I'm so relieved that this show is back, because I do love the characters that this show specifically introduced. And I'm looking forward to spending more time with them. I love all the people that perform the roles, and it's top-notch AAA production, so to speak. So I think there's a lot to look forward to over the course of season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, and Prime Lorca lives too, by the way. So Prime Lorca lives. All right. Well, that is going to do it for episode 33 of Discovery Debrief. We hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please like and follow us on our social media channels And if you'd be so kind, we'd also appreciate it if you were to review for the show on iTunes or Facebook. It only takes a minute, and we'll be happy to read your review on the air when it is posted. If you have any questions, you can follow the show on Twitter at DSC Debrief, where you can also find all of our individual Twitter handles. And feel free to send us questions through Twitter, our Facebook like page, or by emailing us at hailingfrequencies@discoverydebrief.com. Please be sure to set your courses for this feed for future episodes as we barrel forward with regular discussions over the course of Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery. As always, though, until we meet again, please go boldly, my friends.